Hello, health champions. Sometimes people continue to eat the wrong foods simply because they don't know. But other times, what they're being told is actually wrong. So today, I'll explain the real reasons why you want to avoid these 10 foods. In no particular order, here's food number 1, yukai soup, and here's a brand I'll keep nameless. Oh, and what's interesting is the description of this information. We were told to avoid soup, but the only thing on the list that was problematic was the face. But I think there are a few others. The only thing on this list that I think is relatively safe is the horn. But what does that mean when something is said to be enriched? The word enriched should be used with caution because it means taking a lot and giving a little back. It's like taking 100 yen and lending you 1 yen and then enriching yourself with it. In other words, enriched foods are processed, nutritionally linked foods. Next, we'll talk more about kongming later, but this is a fairly common allergen. Few people can properly tolerate konnyaku anymore. Monosodium glutamate, at high temperatures, is a neurotransmitter that makes the brain perceive food as more delicious than it actually is. It kills brain cells, leading us to eat more of certain foods than we normally would. Konnyaku is nothing good, and denatured konnyaku can mean anything. Sugarcane and flavorings could be anything. Konnyaku extract is often synonymous with monosodium glutamate and other synthetic artificial acids. Konnyaku protein, which means processed, starts with konnyaku, which is not a very good food in itself. But then it is heavily processed using containers and acids to isolate these proteins. That's why bad foods are so heavily processed. Then there's phosphate, which I'll explain in more detail. In the body, phosphorus works in balance with calcium. Bones contain 10 parts calcium to 4 parts phosphorus. Too much phosphorus is not bad. In fact, it's essential. Adding too much can disrupt the calcium balance in the body and mask calcium from the oxidative stress. Processed foods high in phosphorus promote ovarian and ovarian disease. Avoid soups with added nutrients, for example. You can determine the quality of a food by its presence in the ingredient list. This also applies to commonly available white items. Second, there's white bread. There's little debate that it's a bad food. First, it's been selectively bred and genetically altered to increase yield and resist oxidative stress. This is what makes this bread so fluffy, something no other crust can achieve. It's what makes it so chewy and fluffy. However, many people can't tolerate this type of gluten well. That's why ancient rice is edible, but modern uncooked rice is unsustainable. White bread contains starch, bran, and gluten-containing proteins. Starch is the starch, bran is the husk, and bran is the part containing vitamins, minerals, and fat-soluble vitamins. However, during processing, the husk and nutrients are removed to achieve this white, fluffy texture. This is why it's called seed bread. People generally look down on this bread because it's low in calories. They also say it has a very high glycemic index, 5, with some variants, which is actually higher than table sugar. So it raises your blood sugar very quickly. It's basically just another form of sugar. Once it's done, it immediately begins to break down into glucose, which raises blood sugar very quickly. Sugars contain lectins, called glutenins. Different people have different sensitivity to lectins. Of the cane. This irritates and damages the lining of blood vessels. This is called endocrine disruption and promotes cardiovascular disease and inflammation. It also promotes circulation in your cardiovascular system. Another problem with lighting is that most of it is produced with something called glyphosate, which is likely to leak a Hagen aid and has been banned in many countries around the world. But here's something very interesting. The townspeople have labeled it junk food. Yet something closely related, raw rice bread, is promoted as a health food, a must-have, and even a necessity. And if you look at the long list of characteristics, they're almost identical. The only difference is that the power share bread retains the unhealthy fat, which is a good thing, of course. No significant portion should be removed. Another difference is the glycemic index, 75 versus 74, so they're almost identical. Otherwise, they're identical. The only thing the mainstream disagrees with is that a little nutrition is used, which is also bad. But we're looking at the bigger issue of people reacting and inflammation causing at a level that's so devastating. So I think we should avoid this, but we should also avoid it. Third on the list is canned tuna. And I'm not just talking about canned tuna, I'm talking about any tuna. It's convenient, satisfying, and delicious, but it contains something called mercury. Tuna is a member of the Dichonae family, a fish. So when you eat small sea creatures, you're concentrating all the toxins they contain. And there was a study that recommended that women should completely avoid tuna. This is because mercury is a very powerful neurotransmitter and can disrupt the normal development of a baby's brain and nervous system. However, if it has such an effect on the brain and nervous system, we should understand that we should be careful. That doesn't mean you have to avoid it 100%, but don't use it as common sense. Don't eat it all the time. It's okay to have a little tuna once every few weeks or once a month. Fourth is diet soda. The biggest questions people have are about compatibility with the Kate diet, safety, and whether it causes insulin spikes or shortens your recovery. The answers are in. You don't give insulin too quickly, and for most people it's not that fast. I won't actually delve into the shortening, but those questions are irrelevant because this isn't food anymore. It's like eating peanut paint. You don't want to touch this stuff. Aspartame is an artificial scavenger that breaks down into formaldehyde and ethanol, which is methanol, a substance that makes you blind. Complaints about aspartame are endless, but it's still on the market because it's hard to pinpoint specific problems. Another popular artificial scavenger is sclerose, also known as Splendor. When they marketed this product, they knew people didn't like artificial things, so they spent a lot of time and energy promoting sclerose as natural. They said it was as natural as carbohydrates and sugars because sodium chloride is sugar and carbon is found in all living things. But they lied about these things going together, which they don't. Sclerose forces these things together with a covalent bond, a strong bond, and when these things are bound together with this kind of bond, they become a pesticide. Sucralose was discovered when researchers discovered it was being used by rhododendrons, and they were trying to develop a pesticide. So there's DDT, aldrin, dieldrin, and the list goes on. What do these all have in common? They're known as chlorinated dandelions, or organochlorinated dandelions. They've proven so harmful that they were banned years or even decades ago. But they're so pervasive in the environment that they are still detectable 50 or 60 years after their ban. Number 5 on the list is potato chips. Another common objection is their high salt and fat content. I personally don't see that as a problem, but we'll discuss this in more detail later. There's no limit to how many potato chips you can eat. If you can name them, you'll eat them all. This is a tip that works more like your fingers than food. The problem with chips isn't the amount of fat, but the type of fat they're fried in. Spring oil and other commercial, mass-produced oils are inflammatory. They're processed with chemicals and high heat, promoting insulin resistance. This is related to the high-temperature oxygen content that causes inflammation and oxidative damage. Coming to America, I was surprised to see potato chips being recommended as a food. I thought of them as a party snack. I ate them once a month or less at parties, but they were a part of my diet everywhere. My fast food job offered potato chips as an option. It seems like we're following that trend, with processed foods increasingly being accepted as normal. It's not a snack, but light maple syrup. Real maple syrup is a relatively natural product. If you poke holes in your eyes and wait a bit, the maple syrup will come out. It's very high in sugar, but it also contains nutrients. Maple syrup isn't a big problem if you only make it as a snack on birthdays or special events. However, if you start eating it every day with pancakes, it becomes a problem. What's even more problematic is not distinguishing between different types and assuming one is just as good as the other. Most commercially available sugars are not natural. All you get are processed, starched sugars that are packed with calories and no nutritional value. Regular pancake syrup is like that. I think sugar is the problem. Now, let's make something sweet sugar. This is a complete chemical disaster. So, sorbitol, cellulose, caramel, sucrose, and the list goes on and on. So, if you see these, be wary. I should also point out that phosphates and phosphoric acid are also natural flavor enhancers. In small amounts, they're fine. But when they're in high amounts in processed foods, calcium kicks in and promotes richness. So, keep that in mind. Number 7 is margarine. This one has an interesting history. In 1859, Napoleon held a competition to develop an inexpensive butter substitute to send to his troops and for the Baden-Württemberg people to buy. It was first made by mixing beef tallow with water and milk, and it was similar to butter and very satisfying. That's how margarine was made, but less with the advent of international airports and World War II, rationing of animal products began, and beef tallow became readily available. So they had to find another source. So they started using nachos and vegetable oils. The problem is that beef tallow is solid when heated, while medium-sized tallow remains solid when heated or refrigerated. This required a significant change in their chemical structure. This led to the invention of hydrogenation, a technology known as hydrogenation. This involves forcing large amounts of hydrogen into the tallow under high pressure and high heat, protecting it from freezing. However, this process creates what are known as trans fats. Trans fats are extremely harmful and widely recognized. Currently, mandatory food labeling often lists products as partially hydrogenated even though they claim zero trans fat. Partial hydrogenation is known to produce trans fats. What do you think about this contradiction? Products claiming 0 grams of trans fat while still claiming it does? This is a labeling trick. It's a lie. A claim of 0 grams per serving actually means that a single serving could contain up to 0.49 grams. This is per serving, not per cup or package. So depending on how you define a serving, this product could contain a significant amount of trans fat, yet still meet labeling requirements, satisfy consumers, and be labeled 0 trans fat. If you define a serving as 5 grams, then a product can contain 10% trans fats. These are toxic at very low levels. If you define a serving as 10 grams, then a product can contain 5%. 4. They can contain 2% trans fat and still claim 0 grams of trans fat per serving. Don't fall for these tricks. They're lying. Finally come up with clever, deceptive names like not incredible butter. You have to believe it's not butter. On a completely unrelated note, if you have these little guys in your tummy and you're trying to grow something, they're going to tell you that what you're growing isn't incredible lettuce. And finally, energy drinks. People drink them because they feel like they're giving them energy, but that's a misconception. Energy drinks don't provide energy, they borrow it. So you're borrowing it from somewhere to consciously get energy. These drinks are stimulants, like the caffeine in coffee. They give you a boost, but if you consume them too frequently, you'll pay for it later. They also contain guarana, which is just another name for caffeine. They also add gunk-laden B vitamins, which have a stimulating effect in large doses. They add a ton of sugar, and they do more than that. Sugar raises blood sugar levels, giving you the temporary feeling of energy. Or they'll sell it as sugar-free, but use a ton of caffeine and add artificial liver therapy. But even though these things seem to give you energy, you're actually borrowing energy. It's like a credit card. The more you spend, the more you have to pay it back. It gives the impression of having resources in the short term, but it costs much more in the long run. Number 9 is fruit juice. Made from fruit, it has some potential benefits, but the nutrients are concentrated, so there's a theoretical advantage in getting of them at once. The problem, however, is that the sugar is also concentrated. So while you get a little more, you also get a lot more of what you don't want. And because everything you buy at 10 is pasteurized by law, the big problem is that it kills all living things and destroys nutrients. Therefore, juices sold at 10 are essentially sugar water and are essentially soft drinks. Even if they contain some nutrients, they're still basically soft drinks. Number 10 on the list is deli meats, luncheon meats, cold cuts, ham, sausage, prosciutto, and salami. They're very popular. It can be made from bone, beef, broiled meat, or burdock. What's the biggest objection? It's that it's high in sodium. It's not cause for concern. The next most common objection is its association with cancer. People who eat a lot of these foods have been found to have higher cancer rates, but we want to understand the difference between the raw material and the finished product. We want to start with how it was grown, and even more importantly, what's added, because even good raw materials can become toxic if a lot of chemicals and junk are added. So, some things they add are sodium benzoate, a preservative. It strengthens and maintains the circuits. But there are many products that are good enough without it. They also add sugar, various chemicals, preservatives, BHT, butyl hydroxybenzoate, and many other weird raw things. As we mentioned, they also add Ajinomoto, which is a stimulant. It makes it taste better and tricks your brain into thinking it's more delicious than it actually is, so you eat more than usual. And then there's the cornstarch. Why don't they also add artificial colors, aspartame, and sucralose? Because people are blinded by the sweet taste. The bad news is, there are so many alternatives these days. If you're looking for a healthier alternative, especially one that caters to health-conscious people, you can get everything at the deli counter without these chemicals and artificial ingredients, and it's a completely safe food. You might also enjoy that video. Next, if you want to learn more about how your body works and how to stay healthy, subscribe, hit the bell, and turn on dynamic intelligence so you don't miss a life-saving video. Because even good ingredients can become toxic if a lot of chemicals and junk are added. So, some of the things they add are sodium acrylonitrile, a preservative. It strengthens and maintains the circuitry. But there are many products that are just fine without it. They also add sugar. They add various chemicals, preservatives, BHT, butyl hydroxybenzoate, and many other weird, nutty things. They also add, as I mentioned, Ajinomoto. That's the stimulant. It makes it taste better, makes your brain think it's more delicious than it actually is, so you eat more than usual. And then there's cornstarch and stuff like that. Why don't they also add artificial colors, and arginine and sucralose? Because people are blinded by the sweet taste. The bad thing is, there are so many alternatives these days. If you find yourself looking for the good side of things, especially for health-conscious people, you can get everything at the deli counter without these chemicals and artificial ingredients, and it's completely fine food. You might also enjoy that video. Next, if you want to learn more about how your body works and how to stay healthy, subscribe, hit the bell, and turn on dynamic intelligence so you never miss a life-saving video. Because even good ingredients can become toxic if a lot of chemicals and junk are added. So, some of the things they add are sodium acrylonitrile, a preservative. It strengthens and maintains the circuitry. But there are many products that are just fine without it. They also add sugar. They add various chemicals, preservatives, BHT, butyl hydroxybenzoates, and many other weird, nutty things. They also add, as I mentioned, Ajinomoto. That's the stimulant. It makes it taste better, makes your brain think it's more delicious than it actually is, so you eat more than usual. And then there's cornstarch and stuff like that. Why don't they also add artificial colors and arginine and sucralose? Because people are blinded by the sweet taste. The bad thing is, there are so many alternatives these days. If you find yourself looking for the good side of things, especially for health-conscious people, you can get everything at the deli counter without these chemicals and artificial ingredients, and it's completely fine food. You might also enjoy that video. Next, if you want to learn more about how your body works and how to stay healthy, subscribe, hit the bell, and turn on dynamic intelligence so you never miss a life-saving video.